7:35. Okay, everything else we're putting on the back burner now because we got the police chief in this morning, and I'm excited about this topic, and thank you for coming in this morning.
Oh, good morning, guys. Good to be here.
Chief, I'm glad you came up. Troubling times for our country. Had another mass shooting down there in Florida at our schools, and the reason I contacted you yesterday is I want to come in and give people in Billings either some reassurance or I want them to question about our procedures and things that we have placed already to see if we're doing enough. Let's take I got a bunch of questions lined up for you. First of all, I want to talk about police preparedness and school preparedness in the incident that or should we have a major incident where we have an active shooter in our school. Is this something that the police now are prepared to handle? Do we have the forces, resources, and capabilities to handle something like this in our community?
Absolutely, we do. The active shooter situation is the absolute worst scenario that a law enforcement agency can deal with, is on top of wherever the incident's taking place. So that is the standard that we train to. Everything else is below that. And so in Billings here, we work very hard, not only with our local officers, but with the county sheriff's department and our state and federal as partners in here. We all have a response on how we're going to handle these things. We're in the community. We provide training to schools and facilities that are large, where people would gather. So for malls and theaters, bigger businesses. And we do that routinely. So we are well prepared. I think you can see some of the capabilities that we have by the unfortunate Big Bear incident, the resources and what was brought to bear there to deal with that. And that was a barricaded situation, not an active shooter. As far as the schools go, again, we have officers in School District 2. We have 7 officers that handle the high schools and the middle schools specifically, and then they hit the grade schools as needed. We also cover Career Center and the Catholic schools as well. Sheriff's Office has SROs in some of their county schools. So we do have an armed presence there, not necessarily for the active shooter, but,
right,
more for the relation and handling the problems, which is really a community within a community when you start talking about, big schools with a couple thousand people in.
Let me ask you a couple questions. Does the public have open access to all of our school buildings?
They do not.
They do not. You
No.
cannot get in a school building in Billings without access or a security.
That is correct.
Okay.
Superintendent Bauck, one of the first things that he did when he got here was embark upon a program to lock doors, and you have to be buzzed in. And so, and that's a huge thing.
Huge. That's big.
Is stopping people at the front door. Generally, it's path of least resistance. If they can't get in a door, they're going to go elsewhere.
Are the police involved in any training of any students or school personnel?
School personnel, not so much the students. We teach the staff again on what the catchphrase is. We want it to be something people can remember under pressure. Is run, hide, fight. And so we teach them what running looks like and how to do that and what to expect. We teach them how to hide. For example, I wouldn't expect a teacher to know the difference between cover and concealment. One hides you and one will stop bullets. And then, of course, fight. If you have to do that, what's at hand, and here's some suggestions. We're not locking anybody down into anything. It's also a mindset change. They didn't sign up for this. They're professionals in educating our children. We have to educate the principals. To allow their staff some latitude to make decisions. If you need to break a window, break a window. Don't worry about that my boss is going to get mad. So those are the things that we talk about.
These are different times, and now different times take different measures. When we were all kids in school, we constantly practiced fire drills. We even haven't had bombing raid drills and earthquake drills where you were taught to get under your desk and hold your head. Are there drills conducted in schools like fire drills and other things in case there happens to be an active shooter? Do they actually do the drills?
I can't speak definitively to that. I do know they have processes and procedures if something happens, where they have, code words and things that they use to trigger different responses. With staff specifically, I know that they spend a lot of time going over those things, whether they actually do that during school or with students. The one thing that we always talk about, and it played out a little bit here, is, when we were growing up, when you had a fire drill, you were in class.
Right.
Yeah. Well, let's have a fire drill when you're at lunch.
Right.
And you have a bunch of people, that are meandering around. So, where do you need to get to? And I think you saw, that happen here, and you had some pretty good responses by staff on where people were going.
Here's my mantra now. It's whatever it takes. It's time to put everything that we've been doing and put that on hold, and now it's whatever it takes, because we have kids dying, and whatever it takes. And I would want or like to see, first of all, I would like to see deadbolts on every school door going into the classroom. I think that would be a deterrent to where police, teachers, administration all have keys from the outside in. That way, at least all the doors, every door could be deadbolted. And I figure if we have enough money to build a softball practice field for $500,000, we ought to be able to put deadbolts on every school door of every classroom. It would be a deterrent. I also think we need the kids, the pile-on aspect. You talked a little bit about the hide and then fight. And, we need to teach kids how to pile on. If they're all hid or behind the door, as soon as somebody enters the door, we have to teach them how to pile on. Drastic times take drastic measures. And I think the days of trying to show them that you love them and you don't hate them and you understand them, those days are now over when it comes to an active shooter.
Well, yeah, and that's on the perpetrator side, and on the flip side of that, I mean, we want people to survive,
right?
And the bottom line in an active shooter situation is get out of the kill zone, and that is exactly what we hammer home. How you do that is dependent upon the circumstances that you see, that you're faced with. It may be totally different down the hall in the shop.
Right.
And so, those are the three options that you can remember under stress, rather than a 10-letter acronym where you have to work through stuff. You can remember run, hide, fight. And so that's what we really stress. So obviously a lot of work on the front end is what's needed to deter and detect. We don't want to turn our schools into fortresses,
right?
And we certainly can. And there's that balance, that you're talking about. Yeah, we could deadbolt everything. Is that a learning environment? So,
well, then when they go into lockdown, how are the kids going to be able to get out?
Well, it's locked down from outside in, not inside out.
Okay,
and then you have supervisory control from the teachers. And then when law enforcement goes in there, we're the ones that are actively, identifying, making sure we don't have a collaborator among the students, and then getting them safely escorted out.
So who makes the final decision on school safety? Is it the police professionals or is it the school?
Well, initially it's the school with our consultation. We work hand in hand. We provide them best practices. We give them our perspective. And we make it very clear when you call 911, and I'm basically talking to the bosses, you're not in charge anymore. To principals or whoever it is in charge in a building, I want you with me. I need your help. I need your support. But if you become a distraction, you're out of here. When you call 911, it's public safety that's in charge. And so very, very clear. And they understand that. Superintendent Bauk does done a great job preparing his staff and getting the bill. I mean, just putting locks on alone.
Right.
Now, the things that you need to consider are, you have kids being kids, they're going to prop a door open because it's faster to get to the parking lot and back from lunch. So, we have to make sure that, the kids are buying into the program as well.
And we have to make sure the kids police one another. If they know somebody who is propping that door open so the kids can get back on lunch, we need to find that kid. And we need to put in some disciplinary measures that will not happen again, because it only takes once.
Yep.
Only takes once. Whatever it takes is what we have to do. Chief, I've got a couple more questions here. Number one, no community is immune from this now anywhere else in the United States. And I really think there should be a wake-up call, first of all, to some of our smaller communities, because they just don't have the resources there. And response time would be a long, long time. So they have even more homework to do than we do in a city like Billings. So I'm asking you, with the amount of limited resources we have, how quickly is our response to, say, an active shooter, to where we could get 20 police officers there just like that?
It is very good here in Billings. We bring a lot of resources to bear very quickly. And like I said, we have great relationships with our partners. Mm-hmm. And when you have a situation like this, it's all hands on deck, and it doesn't matter what shape the badge is or color the uniform is. What you argue about is who's doing the paperwork at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But the way we respond to these things, the standard procedure is to get to the situation and mitigate the problem as soon as possible. So we're taking the first 3-4 officers who show up, mm-hmm. and they're going hunting for this person. Okay. And that's what we do, because we learn from Columbine, mm-hmm. that if you sit and wait for the SWAT team to show up, you set up a perimeter, people die. Mm-hmm. And if that would have happened in Billings, mm-hmm. when Columbine did, mm-hmm. we'd have done the same thing. That was the best practices at the time. That has changed. Good. And so part of the training that we talked about, guys, is that the first 3 or 4 guys that show up, they're going. Mm-hmm. And our SWAT team, our special tactics people, along with the other departments, mm-hmm. we have 15 officers who have the rifles, have the big armor, mm-hmm. have special stuff. The other ones have patrol rifles, handguns, mm-hmm. And the body armor, and we're basically going in, and we mm-hmm. want to stop the killing. If the shooting stops, we don't have to force the issue, because nobody's dying. Give us an old-fashioned hostage situation, we can work that problem. But when the guns are going off, we assume people are dying, and we need to go stop that immediately. So the follow-up people that will come, that's the 20 that you're talking mm-hmm. about. They will respond. They will handle setting up the perimeter. Mm-hmm. They will be follow-up teams. We have provided equipment to the fire department, and this is something that is, I think, very unique to Billings, is that they have body armor, they have medical kits, and they come with us mm-hmm. into the building.
Do we have central communications where everybody is on the same radio link, the same radio wave with trauma, police, fire, sheriffs?
Police and sheriff have the ability to talk directly. We're not on any of the medical channels. Mm-hmm. However, the communication center is in one location, mm-hmm. handles all of that.
Do we have enough trauma units at our local hospitals, trauma teams, to handle a mass trauma if we have 20 to 30 to 40 people on critical condition that need trauma treatment immediember
Well, we have two level 1 traumas with both hospitals. Mm-hmm. As far as the number of staff and number of rooms they have, that I don't know. Mm-hmm. You're aware we routinely work mass casualty drills, airplane crashes, things like that. So again, it's a triage situation, it's a transport situation, and we're in lockstep with how that thing works. If they have an ER doc for 40 casualties, I doubt that. Mm-hmm. But again, that just goes to their triage and medical response with stuff. You're going to be overwhelmed. Sure. If you have, 10. Right. You're going to be immediately overwhelmed. Anything over that. So.
Do we have the transportation available to get the people there? Do we have enough ambulances? If we have to transport 30 to 40 people, can we handle that?
That, I think, is something that we need to look at. AMR does a wonderful job for us here, but there's a limited amount of resources mm-hmm. Here in town. I think at any given time you might have 3 to 5 ambulances out and about, and they're handling things, from our calls to accidents to nursing homes. Routinely running people back and forth, doing things there. So. I think that's something that we could probably, really need to look mm-hmm. at on how to transfer. But I know it's been discussed. What are you going to do when you run out of transportation? Right. But again, that's our networking. Right. We are tied in with the National Guard here. A couple phone calls. I can get some military stuff. So there's some big trucks right there, for example.
This I also want to talk about this a little bit, and this is part of the sticking point with a lot of people out there who don't believe in this type of thing. But as I said earlier, whatever it takes, I want to know, Are there any limitations that have been put on you or your fellow agencies, police departments, sheriff's departments, things like that, when it comes to what you can and cannot do, what you cannot stick your nose into and cannot get your fingers on, when it comes to things like medical records, psychological reports, school records and evaluations on troubled students, things like that would help you do a better job on enforcement, knowing who these potential people are, access to social media accounts, things like that? Are there limitations currently in place that prohibit you from doing the job that we need to be done?
Yeah, absolutely. Every one of those entities that you spoke of have certain privacy restrictions on who can access what. Mm-hmm. In law enforcement, for the most part, we can get stuff that we need. Sometimes we got to jump through a few hoops. Obviously, we've worked through some significant issues with the medical profession because of the HIPAA rules, we've come to great solutions, great cooperation now locally, is that we know how to maneuver through that we can get the information that we need. But before it was, no, can't tell you. Mm-hmm. I need to know this information, no, can't tell you. Mm-hmm. So that's very frustrating. Same with the schools. They've got, and I think this is some of the debate that you may be hearing out of Florida, that sharing student information,
right?
That type of stuff. So there is confidentiality issues. Mm-hmm. I can tell you here that pretty much if it's really bad, people will share and we'll sort it out later. So I'm pretty confident that if there's a serious threat and everybody has mandatory mm-hmm. reporting as well.
Oh, so let me ask you this question then. So if we have school counselors in the Billings area at the school counselor's office, and they know of problem students, they know of students that are suffering emotionally, they know of these students that are having some questions and some problems like that, is this information being shared with our local authorities and police departments so they have a little insight and they're upfront on what potentially is in the school systems?
Personally, I think that if that situation that you describe has risen to a point where they believe that there's a risk of violence, mm-hmm. That is communicated to us.
Well, I would hope so, because I do believe that there are people out there in the system, counselors and others, who believe no matter what, they are going to protect the right of that individual and not relay that information. And which down the road, as long as the information is put into the proper hands, I don't think it's jeopardized.
Yeah, and those are policy and judgment decisions at each entity, not just the schools, mm-hmm. but again, medical, and you have private practitioners out there. Mm-hmm. But it's been my experience. There's been some things that are kind of on the bubble that you'd like to have information,
right?
That you get frustrated with. But in my experience, if there's been something that a red flag goes up mm-hmm. and people say, heads up, there's some dangerous signals here. That information is relayed. In a school, for us, a lot of times it goes through the school resource officer,
right,
to vet that information mm-hmm. and then pass it on accordingly.
Do you get that information from anywhere else besides the schools? And we're talking about some of these rehabilitation programs or some of these addiction clinics or some of these other things that these people are in that are known to have problems. Are they flagged?
Like I said, sometimes we get it if somebody mm-hmm. has really expressed concern. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff we get coming from hospitals, for example, is somebody that might have walked away and has talked about suicide. Mm-hmm. They give us that information all the time. And so it's very, very similar. I think that there's a benchmark that once they hit that, and it's like, I got to tell somebody here, mm-hmm. something bad's going to happen, whether it's to the community, to somebody else, or to this particular person. Anything, gray area or underneath that, they might err on the side of caution.
I'm hoping that the teachers know about the students that are in their classrooms. I'm hoping that information is shared with them. If they have volatile kid, if they have kids that are currently under treatment for depression, anything like that, I'm hoping that the teachers know what they're dealing with so they can use a little precaution and a little extra eye open and a little extra ear open so they can maybe recognize the situation.
Yeah, my experience with School District 2 is that's exactly the case. That there are there's lots of communications. They even have half days or short days, or early in, early out, to discuss just the thing that you're talking about, to make sure that students are they may be having problems or identified. Special plans and accommodations, whatever the case may be. So I know that takes place here in School District 2. Can't speak for the others, but they're running a pretty good ship at the school district. And again, Superintendent Bach, when he came in, first thing he did was ramp up security. Shortly after his arrival, Sandy Hook happened, and again, like you say, it's a wake up call. And for a town our size, you hope it never happens,
right.
But it's not a matter if, it's when.
That's right. You have to be prepared.
And we are prepared. And we do everything we can on the front end to deter and prevent. But we got great partnerships with law enforcement, with medical profession, and the schools and the colleges too. They're not immune either.
Let's reverse this then just a little bit, because I also think this is important. The Billings police do apprehend somebody who is not stable, a transient here in town. They know this person should probably be detained. They get booked. They're into your system. They're released and back out in the streets, back out in society again. Is there anything we can do to change that if you know that they are a viable threat?
Well, those decisions are made by the judges. They interpret the laws, and law enforcement just enforces. I will tell you that your county attorney's office, Scott Twido and his crew, and the judiciary here are very mindful of who's a threat, and will not just kick them out.
Do you get to weigh in on that? Do they
Absolutely.
ask for your? Okay,
absolutely. Yeah, we have a meeting every morning at the county attorney's office where felony cases are presented, and that's where we have our input to say, this person is bad, has got significant issues. We have no control. If somebody is suffering mental illness and we take them to the hospital, that's their deal, whether they admit them or whether they, say you're drunk or, go talk to your counselor and they let them out. We don't have any control over that.
Right.
But if you get a mandatory commitment or an involuntary commitment, of course that's helpful. But again, it's resources, it's space, it's all we're dealing with. Mental illness is a huge problem, across the country, and we're not immune. We have it here, and we have our co-occurring addiction problems.
It's one of the things I talked about this morning is there has to be more liability for these people who put them back onto the streets. If they go to these medical professionals, if they get some hotshot lawyer that gets them off on a technicality, or they have a judges that say you can't do that to human beings, and they put them back on the street, and then they go back out on the street, and they continue the same thing that they've done in the past, there has to be some kind of liability for that, because people can die. It's new game now. Whatever it takes. And we have to have more liability of these people that are protecting the people that we need to keep from society. That's my own personal opinion. I got another question for you. Is there a co-op between, for instance, our resources that we have here in Billings and say some of the smaller outlying areas who are very, very vulnerable, whether it would be Huntley or Shepherd, or whether it would be Roundup, or whether it would be Joliet, or whether it would be Columbus, because they don't have the kind of resources that we have here. Do we have some kind of co-ops already in place with those towns?
We do. It's covered in state statute. It's called mutual aid. Our resources are a phone call away. I routinely get calls for help, not on stuff like this, but even in big investigations or something of that sort, where we'll send resources there. But most definitely, if we have an active shooter in Joliet, for example, that phone call from the sheriff is going to come here for resources, and the sheriff's department and us will send resources there. We are regional teams. Our SWAT team and our bomb squad take care of the eastern part of the state. Our hazmat, the same thing. They're a regional team.
Mm-hmm.
So we are expected, and I do expect those small towns to call us if they need help with something. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no resources there. Mm-hmm. You got a sheriff and a deputy, and that's it.
And we are vulnerable more than a lot of states because, we're not all major town, all resourced, all connect with major thoroughfares. I mean, we are more vulnerable that way than most states.
Yeah, we are available. We have the ability to bill them for our costs and all that. Mm-hmm. I generally, don't do that. I said buy them a Happy Meal and send gasoline and send them home.
Yeah, give them a Happy Meal.
If we're going to be there for 2 weeks, then we'll talk. But yeah, we are available to help those people. And again, if I need some resources, they're coming in here. But primarily, it's us and the Sheriff's Department are going to handle stuff in Billings and Yellowstone County. And we can bring a pretty formidable number of officers to bear with a lot of resources.
One more thing I would like to cover, and then we'll let you go. And this is the last thing, is an appeal. And I know it's probably an appeal from law enforcement, too, and me and a lot of people in the community. But we need our kids in this community, we need our high schoolers in this community and the kids in grade schools in this community to speak up. We need them to get a hold of their parents or their school officials or law enforcement. They can be the ones who really make a difference in this kind of situation. Anything that they see on Facebook, anything that they see scribbled on a mirror in the school, anything that they get an Instagram picture of where a guy thinks it's funny, it may not be funny anymore. I would hope that the police assure these kids that all of those things will be taken very seriously and that you are really relying on them to help police their own community.
Absolutely. It's that, again, we're into the cliches, but if you see something, say something. We're 150 strong in the Billings Police Department. That's from me on down. I haven't done any real crime fighting in quite some time. So, limited. But when you bring 112,000 people, 111, 112 sets of eyes, given the odd one-eyed guy, you got a pretty formidable deterrent when people are watching out for each other. Mm-hmm. And when you see our annual report, the one thing I always look at is a category called suspicious calls. And what those are people doing just that. Something doesn't look right in my neighborhood and I call. Now, 9 times out of 10, it turns out to be nothing.
Right.
But at least we can check. At least I can identify the old guy walking the dog out there by Pioneer School and let people know that that's all he's doing.
Right.
And it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what age group or where you're coming from. If something's suspicious in the school, it's even better because I've got a school resource officer there.
Right.
Go look it up and determine the credibility. If nothing else, just touching base or even telling somebody, look, I know that you're scribbling stupid things on the mirror. Stop that. Things of that sort. But again, we need people to report stuff because we can't be everywhere. I don't have those relationships. Where I'm seeing them. I know a lot of our people are on Facebook all the time.
Right.
I'm not.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of info there.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of info there. So.
And I'll say it, and I will say it, because I know the police chief can't say it and others can't say it. If you see somebody out there and you think they look suspicious, I don't care what sex they are, what race they are, what religion they are. I don't care if people are going to label you, call you prejudiced, call you bigoted, call you racist. I don't care anymore. Whatever it takes. We're talking about people's lives and people dying. And if people want to label you because you have a concern about the safety of your community, tell them to hell with them. Mm-hmm. You call me. We'll take care of that. But it's so important nowadays, no matter what, to let local authorities, school officials, and people act on the side of caution and figure it out. Don't worry about taking the heat. And for those people who persecute you when you have concern about their community, let's see what happens when they're a target, when they're a victim, when their kids are targeted in school, when there's somebody who gets mugged on a street or attacked in a Walmart parking lot or has a transient thump them up on the side of the head. Then let's see how concerned they are. Now, I'll say it for you because I know you didn't have to say that. But,
Chief, why you got to yell?
Well, I tell you, sometimes my blood gets boiling for stuff like that. And
clean the spit off the inside of the window.
I know
there,
it.
so.
Well, we're talking about people's lives and safety here, and that should trump everything.
It is absolutely a very, very serious issue. And if everybody does their part, we may not be able to prevent it, but even one time, if we can intervene and then respond appropriately, it's just for the best. So, we're on it on the law enforcement side, and the schools are as well. Great partnerships, as I said. The community can rest easy that we're prepared. But we can always do better, and we'll continue to work on that.
Well, I feel a lot better now that we have you in here. We know it. We got a little more insight. I hope people got a little more insight on our preparedness here. And Chief, thanks for the job you and all your officers do. Damn good job every day out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that, guys.
We're behind you 100%. Mark?
9 minutes after 8.
Mark?
9 minutes after 8.
Mark?
9 minutes after 8.
Mark?
9 minutes after